Good afternoon, everybody. Matt here at Coldbrook Farms. So it's been a week now since we've had our Buckeye mixed chicks that we picked up. They're 12 days old when we picked them up, so they're 19 days old now. And we're going to show you how they're progressing, and we're going to try a little experiment. We're going to plant some potato seeds because if you're anything like me, I can't wait for spring and I can't wait to start planting things and getting some chickens going and all that fun stuff, but we're still getting snow. It's snowing right now. So we got some potatoes that we got last fall, and they are starting to go to seed, and they're extremely large potatoes. So we're going to try and use those large seed to try and produce some more large potatoes, just as a succession kind of thing. In the animal world, when you're breeding, if you're breeding for bigger and better, you always breed the bigger and better males and females to get bigger and better young stuff. So we're going to try and use our best specimens from our vegetables that we can use for seed to try and produce better produce, bigger, better produce. So we're going to try to grow them in 5-gallon buckets with regular potting soil. So first things first, here are the baby chicks at 19 days old. Everybody's growing a lot. If you watch back to our old video and see, they have grown quite a bit. And they're starting to learn to fly, so we're going to have to clip these guys' wings as soon as they go out of this brooder. That's them. So over here, we're going to start and try to plant some potatoes in these buckets. So we picked these buckets up at the feed store this morning. They're only a couple bucks, and a couple big bags of potting mix. I bought more than I need. This is just generic old potting mix. Probably only going to need one bag, and the other one will be for when we start some seeds in the house here. So we got that picked up, and then over here in our potato crate, we have some potatoes. It's kind of dim over here, but we have some potatoes, and they are going to seed. As you can see, they're starting to eye out and grow. So we're probably a little bit late doing this, but we're going to try it anyway. So as you can see, some of these are pretty good size. The biggest potatoes that we had, we have eaten, but that's a pretty good size seed potato. That's going to give us, if I was to cut this and plant this in the ground, this is going to give us 3 potato plants. So when you're cutting potato seed, I'll bring this over to the light. When you're cutting potato seeds, you want to cut the seed potato so that it has an eye on every piece. Usually minimum 1 eye, obviously, because that's where the shoots come from, but that's an eye, that's an eye, that's an eye, and all of these spots where the shoots are starting to grow are all eyes of the potato. So when you cut your seed potato, you want to make sure every piece has at least 1 eye, if not more, and then every one of those eyes should, as long as there's enough potato still attached that it can feed the eye as it grows, every one of those eyes should produce a potato plant. So normally you just cut these in like halves, thirds, whatever it would take to put an eye on each piece. So we'll do that. Okay, so we got our potatoes out here. These are all of our bigger specimens that have eyes on them that have started to shoot out. All potatoes have eyes. I guess I should probably add that first. So you can cut these with a knife or any sort of sharp object that you've got handy. I'm just going to use an axe. I'm just going to stand it up like that so that the head stays upright. Where I'm doing this one-handed and trying to video at the same time, this is going to work the easiest. So we'll just start by taking a potato that's got 2 eyes. So you see there's a sprout starting there and another one starting there, and then we have all of these sprouts up on this end. So what we're going to do is we're just going to line this up over the axe head like that, and then we're just going to cut it in half like so. Same thing with this one. 2 shoots, we're going to split it right down the middle. And mind you, this axe isn't extremely sharp, so I'm not in any danger of cutting myself for the most part. But so let's see this one here. It's got two eyes very close together right there. There's another one there. So we're going to try and split this one down the middle again, like we did the last one. Like that. And this one's not looking so good, but we're going to split it anyway. There might be an eye there that I'm just not seeing. There. So, we've got all of our seed potatoes cut. So if we were planting these in the garden, I'd just take all of these. I got my faithful helper. So if we were planting all these in the garden, I'd take all of these seed pieces, put them in a bucket. I'd go out, put a little fertilizer down inside the trench, inside the row where we were planting these. And we're going to do a video on planting these outside, but I'll just give you the quick rundown. So we cut our seeds, we take them out in the bucket, put a little compost or fertilizer, granular fertilizer down inside the trench where we're going to plant the potatoes. We plant these with the eyes pointing up so that we go in the ground like that or like that. Normally they don't have shoots on them this big. Normally they just have a little spot on them like that. So we always plant them with the cut side facing down. It gives the shoots a chance to grow up without having to grow around the edge of the potato. So that's usually a general rule we go with. And then, because obviously there's no eyes on this side, and the eyes are going to want to go for the light, because the eye is where your plant starts. So then we'd bury these over, and then once they start to shoot up through the soil, we go along and we hill them up and try to bury the plants in the soil, which kind of sounds counterproductive, but what it does is it forces, we don't bury the entire plant, we just bury the majority of the green plant that's up above the ground. So what that's going to do is that's going to force all of the energy of the plant to go into the roots and grow root. So the reason why I wanted to focus on growing the root is potatoes are a root vegetable, they're a root tuber. And if we can prevent the plant from putting all of its energy and all of its storage into the upper growth, which isn't going to give us anything, if we can force it to put all of that into the roots, it'll grow more potatoes, bigger, healthier, stronger potatoes. So we'll hill them a couple of 2-3 times until we've either got the hill as high as we can get it with the soil that's around, or until we run out of soil to hill up, or the plants have just gotten to the point where they're too big to hill anymore. And then at that point we just let them go and let them feed the roots. We've forced the root growth, so now we're going to just let it do its thing. So what we're going to do with these buckets is I'm going to plant them in the buckets. I'm going to fill the buckets about half full of soil. Then we'll put the seed potatoes in. And I've probably got more seed potatoes here than I have bucket, but I probably should have bought more than 2 buckets. But this is just a trial, so we're going to give this a go. So we'll put them in here, half full of soil, put the seed potato in. We'll put some soil over enough to cover the seed potatoes. We'll give them a little bit of water. And then we're going to put these by the patio door. Because like I said, we're in the middle of winter, trying to get a jump on this because my green thumb is itching. And I want to get some stuff planted, so this is my way of trying out some stuff. So we're going to put these by the patio door where they can get some sun and some heat, and we'll see what happens, see if they sprout. And if they sprout, we'll let them get a little bit of growth on, and then we'll bury them again, and so on until the buckets are full, and then we'll just let them grow. We'll just continue to water them. Maybe we'll add a little bit of fertilizer, but not a lot. We'll just let them feed off the soil. So we're going to get the bag of soil cut open and in some soil in these buckets, and then we'll show you how we plant. Okay, so happy accident, we found another big container that we use for kindling wood, but we're going to try using this for some potatoes as well, because we got more potatoes than we have buckets. So we've got our soil in our buckets, so we're just going to take and just kind of flatten that out in there. You don't want to pack this down, you want to just flatten it out. You don't want this to get packed, because if you get packed, too much compaction in the soil, there won't be anywhere for the roots to expand to, and there won't be anywhere for the potatoes to grow. So you want to try and keep this relatively fluffy. Take 2 liters of potatoes, man. Okay, so we got them nice and flat. Now, what we want to do is we want to take our seed potato, and you can see that one has an eye right there. So I'm going to be a little bit selective through these. We're going to plant the ones with the strongest eyes where we're limited on space. So that one's got a pretty strong set of eyes, so we're going to go cut side down into the soil, kind of like that. You just want to press them in, don't got to press them in very hard. Just into the soil and into the soil. Same thing here. I'll plant that guy in there. So I had that big potato that I showed you with the intro to the video. That was the biggest one of the bunch, so I want to plant him in here by himself, just to try and get as much yield out of him as we can. Some of our bigger seed in there. Now I've seen some videos on these where people say you can layer the seed in here, so you can like plant some, bury them, plant some more, bury them again. We're not going to do that. We're just going to go one layer, because if we get too much, there's not going to be enough room for everybody to do their thing. And the way I look at it, if this only produces a handful of baby potatoes, then it was a success. And if it doesn't produce anything at all, well, then we won't do this next year. Okay, so those are our biggest, strongest pieces of seed. Outside, I wouldn't pick through and take the biggest, strongest pieces. I'd probably just plant them all, because eventually they should all sprout, or a good majority of them will sprout. So as you can see, we've got 3 to 4 pieces of seed in the 2 smaller buckets, and we've got 6 or 7 in the bigger bucket. So now we're just going to cover these over with soil, and we'll give them a little bit of water. Probably for the first few days they're going to live down here in the basement, because until the plants break through the soil, they don't need any light. When we start germinating our other seeds, like our beans, peas, all that kind of stuff, when we first start to germinate those, if I'm direct seeding them outside and I really want to make sure I'm going to get as much growth out of the seed as I can, what I'll do is I'll take the seeds, I'll put them on a piece of paper towel on a plate, and then I'll put the seeds on the paper towel, cover them with another piece of paper towel, wet it down, very wet, get a lot of moisture in there, and then we'll put that in a cool dark space or warm dark space. Warmer the better. You can do it in cool. You're just looking to break that seed coat, soften the seed coat, make that plant start to set out root, and then plant them. The ones that don't break seed coat and don't start to set out root are probably not going to germinate at all. So if you can start them inside like that, it's up to you. You can plant them direct. I plant them direct. Sometimes I'll do both if I want to get a jump on it. Say it's our first real good planting day, the temperature and the soil is up, and I want to make sure I get the most bang for my buck to get them started and get ahead of the game. Instead of just putting them in the ground and hoping for the best, I'll germinate them inside and then plant them outside. Usually it takes a couple days for them to break seed coat, and then they're good to go after that. My next succession, I'll probably just direct seed, dry seed, and then my next one as I get later and later into the season. So my early season, I want to get them going right away in my early seed. As I start to succession seed, and go through the spring. Mid-spring, I'm not as worried about the germination. I'm worried about it big time at the start because I want that big flush. I want those plants up and going. I want them producing as soon as possible. Mid-spring, I've got time. As the summer's going to progress, they can come up a little bit slower. I'm not in a rush. As the seeding and planting season starts to wind down and I get down closer to the end of spring into early summer, and I know my growing days are going to be limited. So if my plants take 70 days to maturity, I can get ahead of that by germinating them inside by 6 or 8 days, maybe 10 days, just depending, and then plant them outside and they'll go a lot faster. I'm not waiting for them to try and break through. I'm not wasting time on seeds that aren't going to germinate. Everything that's going to germinate will be ready. Stick it in the ground, let it grow. So when I want them to start right now, early season, I'll germinate them inside, then get them outside. And then as my season progresses and I get into the middle of my seeding season or starting season, then I'll direct seed dry seed outside without germinating because I've got time. And then as I start to get closer to crunch time and I'm running out of time to start seeding, then I'll germinate inside again to make sure I have that extra growth later on into the season. I'm not waiting. And we can have a longer growing season. We can get a longer yield out of our plants. So we're going to cover more of that as the spring progresses and as we get closer to germinating and get closer to seeding and planting. But for now, that's just a quick kind of overview of what we do and how we're doing it and why. I'll get into more detail of that as we get going. So I'm going to bury these guys, and then I'll be back and we'll talk about how much soil we're putting over them. So I'll do a couple and I'll be right with you. Hang tight. Okay, so here we go. We got these all buried in here. We filled this up with soil. As you can see, there's the top of one of the shoots. So there's only a couple inches of soil over top of these guys. So we're just going to spread that around, get it flat, nice and level, make sure he's covered. And we're just going to give it a little bit of a pack down with our fingers. We're not going to pack this very hard. We're just going to pack that fluffy top down. Just so the water doesn't rush down through this potting mix. We're just going to give it a little light compaction with our fingers, just so it'll hold the water above and slowly go down through the soil. Same thing in here. We're just going to spread this around nice and flat. Shoot sticking up there, and then we're just going to give this a nice little pat down. So it's just the top layer that we want to put a little bit of compaction on, just to help keep those shoots under the soil so they'll start to establish some roots and not all top. And so, like I said, the water doesn't just rush down through the soil and lay in the bottom. So, like I said, these guys are going to live down here. We're going to give these some water, just enough to moisten that soil, so the plants can start to take up some nutrients out of that soil and not strictly out of the potato. So the way a potato seed works, I'll add this too. So with your potato seed, you have the eye where the shoot comes from. Okay? Now anybody who knows about plant science, and we'll do a video on how seeds and all that stuff work, the potato plant grows the potato tuber, which is a root. It's attached to the smaller fibrous roots that come down from the plant, and this is where the plant stores all the energy for its next year's growth to start over, because potatoes are not perennial. They are an annual plant that needs to be planted every year, and this is their way of making seed. Some plants make dry seed, so like a pea or a bean is a dry seed. So with a potato, they make these tubers in the ground, and that is their seed. So if you were to leave those in the ground all year, and you didn't have a really harsh climate like we have here that'll kill these will grow back in the spring. So what'll happen is the eye will set up this little shoot, and that will start running, looking for light, looking for sunlight to start to build nutrients, because the nutrients that's stored in this potato, in the meat of the potato, this is energy storage for this young growth. So this young growth is going to run for the light, and this is where it's going to get its energy from to get there. If it takes too long, i.e. they're buried in the soil too deep, or it's a really damp, dark growing area, they're not getting any light, the sun's not really all that strong, this will die in the soil because it will run out of nutrients and it will run out of energy that's stored in this potato. This will run out, and this will not be able to continue on without finding some sort of light to feed chlorophyll and energy back to the roots to make the roots grow. So this will grow out into the light. This will start to grow from around the base here of this shoot more fibrous roots, which will eventually grow more tuber potatoes, which will be energy storage for the next year's growth, and so on. So energy storage, new growth feeds from the energy storage to get the sunlight, and then to take energy from the sun and water and nutrients in the soil, start new roots and grow new potatoes. Okay, so we're also going to add to this video, because spring's coming, and I know everybody's excited about getting chicks, and they're all probably wondering, well, what are we going to do about a brooder? So this is our simple, easy brooder. As you can see in the earlier part of the video, we have 10 chicks in one of these brooders set up already. Layer chicks tend to not outgrow these as fast because they don't grow as fast as a meat bird does. So for meat birds, obviously the bigger the brooder the better, if not do multiple. So there's 2 containers here. We just picked these up. These are used ones that we had from moving. So we have 2. Ideally, you can buy these new. I mean, if you have some kicking around, or you have a friend that's looking to get rid of some, or whatever, you can pick these up pretty cheap at the hardware store. They come with lids, all that fun stuff. So these make great carriers for moving the chickens. So you can move them from one location to another in one of these, from all stages of their age, right from chicks on up to full-size chickens. But they also work great for brooders. So when we first start out, we have 2 of these here. I've got them stacked on top of each other, inside of one another. So when we drill holes through, we're drilling 2 at a time. We ordered our turkeys today, so we're getting 10 turkeys coming. They'll be here sometime in June. That's just how far ahead we have to order them here. There's only a limited supply, and they go very quick, so you got to get your name on the list early. We just buy them from the feed store. This will be our first kick at the can with turkeys, but we start them in a brooder the same as we start our chicks in a brooder, just to get them through that really vulnerable stage. So I'll show you really quick how we do this. These are really easy to build, really easy to set up. If you're a first-time chicken owner, or you're just doing these as a backyard project, one of these will work perfectly for you. If you're in a bigger scale operation and you need more than 10 or 20 or so on, whatever, either multiples of these, or you're going to need to build a standalone structure or unit. We did 30 birds last year, we did 26 birds, 6 layers and 20 meat kings. The 20 meat kings lasted in one of these for about a week and a half to 2 weeks, and then they outgrew this, and I had to move them into a bigger brooder area that we had built in the back of the barn. I had the layers in there with them, and after about a week, the meat birds had outgrown the layers, and they were pushing them out of the feed and running them over, so I had to separate them out, put the layers into a smaller brooder just of their own, put the meat birds in the bigger Rubbermaid brooder until they were about a week and a half, 2 weeks old. Then they went into another bigger section in the back of my barn in a horse stall that I had sectioned a little piece out of, and then I moved the layers back into the bigger Rubbermaid brooder. So this year I'm hoping to do it all in these. By the time the turkeys come, hopefully my big Rubbermaid brooder will be set up and ready for them, and I won't have any chicks in them unless I get crazy and buy more chicks. and I'm hoping that I can run my meat birds in these, and then as they go out I can either have new layer chicks come into these, or I may buy them all at the same time and then just run the meat birds in this like I did last year. When they get too big, move them into the smaller horse stall area and just let her buck that way. So we're going to do the video on how to do this, show you how to do this. So what you're going to need is you're going to need your Rubbermaid containers. You're going to need a drill with the biggest bit you can get your hands on. This isn't the biggest bit that I have, it's just the biggest one I have on hand at the moment. It was the one I used last year for the layers when I built their smaller brooder. So this is big enough, you just have to drill more holes. So depending on how fussy you want to be, you can go and measure on the side of this Rubbermaid container and mark where you want all your holes to be. If you're not worried about aesthetics, you can just drill a bunch of holes through there wherever you want, but we're going to measure this out, mark the holes, drill them, and then that's pretty much it. So once you drill the holes in this so that they can get airflow through the sides of this so they don't suffocate, they need to have lots of ventilation. That's the key with chickens of all ages and all sizes, is lots of ventilation. And you're going to put a nice layer of bedding in here. I usually put a block of wood across one end to put the feeder and the water on. And then I build a little top, like you've seen on my other brooder, just a 2x2 rim around the outside, and then I cover this with hardware cloth. It does multiple things. It helps keep cats and predators out of this. If you have kids, it also helps keep the kids out of it, so they're not grabbing the chicks and handling them and dropping them or disturbing them and causing them any stress, more so than what they already have. Because chicks are very vulnerable when they're young. If they don't get the right amount of heat, they can die. If they don't get the right amount of ventilation, they can die. If they're overstressed, they can die. So they're kind of finicky when they're young, but once they hit a week to 2 weeks of age, they're pretty well past the crucially vulnerable, the least little thing's going to affect them. They tend to be a little bit hardier once you get past that first week hurdle, and then they just get stronger as time goes on. So that's how we build the brooder. And then when we get the chicks in here, we put deep litter in the bottom and we feed them. You can use a medicated feed if you don't want to use medicated feed. You can go with a non-medicated feed. We feed them good clean water with apple cider vinegar, honey, and garlic in the water. The apple cider vinegar and the garlic help with an immune system boost. They really give them a good kickstart and make them strong. And the honey just sweetens it up so that way they're more apt to drink it. There's a little bit of issues with people wanting to use medicated feed. By the time you are ready to process meat birds, the medicated feed's already gone through them. There's no remnant of the medication left in the bird. For chick starter, you only run a chick starter on them for the first 3 to 4 weeks of their life, and the meat birds, depending on how fast they grow and how much you're feeding them, are ready for process at 8 to 12 weeks. You can span it on a little further, but the longer you keep them, the less you feed them, because the meat birds will grow so fast. If you don't feed them accordingly, their legs will break under their own body weight because they grow faster. They grow more body than they do bone, and their legs will give out, their hearts will give out, their lungs will give out. So you have to be very careful how you feed meat birds when they're young, and we'll get into more detail of that when we get our meat birds, when we get our chicks. We'll do a video that's just geared to that. But for today, we're just gonna drill these brooders, get them ready, and then they're all set for when we get more chicks. We can just put them in, and then we can do the video on the details of raising them from there. Okay, so there you have it. These are the brooders. They're all set and ready to go. Just need to bed them and put chickens in them. So we drilled holes all along the side there for ventilation on both sides, on both brooders. Nice and easy, we just stack them on top of each other and drill away. And just as simple as that. So if you guys have any questions about the brooders, or how to build them, or anything like that, feel free to leave a comment in the comments below, and we'll try and answer those for you just as soon as we can. And if you guys are viewing our videos regularly, hit like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one. From what somebody's telling me is it's time to go do barn work. See you later.